Hello guys, my name is Tito Justin and welcome to this Advocacy presentation. In this short presentation, I am taking you through a strategy for access to girls' education in South Sudan. So let's start with education facts in South Sudan. In South Sudan, the literacy rate is 27%, in which 40% are males and then 16% are females. Education expenditure is 1.8% only of GDP globally. So the teacher to pupil rate in primary school is 50 to 1, that is 2016. And then again, teachers to student ratio in secondary schools is 50 to 1. The teacher training is 47% primary school teachers trained and then 57% secondary school teachers trained. Teacher gender composition is 12% female only and then 88% are male. That is according to the Ministry of General Education and Instruction of South Sudan in 2011. So until now, 2.2 million children are out of school in South Sudan, and about 60% of 7-year-old girls are not in school. The gender gap widens with age, while 10.6% of boys were in secondary school at age 16. This was the case for only 1.3% of 16-year-old girls. Up to 86% of learners are at least 5 years over age for their grade, meaning that a learner in primary grade 1 official entrance age is 5 years, may be 10 years old or even older. Now, what is the problem? If you see, the figures are really very low and girl child education is really being impacted. So what is the reason behind this? So one of the reasons behind this is early marriage, and most of the communities in South Sudan are almost pastoralist, and early marriage is persistent. And in the same community, we also have forced marriage, which is being registered as a cause to this. And then poverty, we have gender discrimination, school distances, and weaker educational system that is across the country, resulting to a low rate of girls' education in South Sudan. So when you look at the statistics and what causes all those issues associated with girls' child education in South Sudan, it's really heartbreaking. And here is a case study to justify this. This case study was taken by me. I like it so much and it's so heartbreaking. So Kelo 11 from South Sudan is too young for marriage. From a poor and remote family, Akelo is also a girl who lost both parents some years ago. Now, Akelo's uncle, whom she was staying with, had been forcing her for marriage. Akelo was not happy at all. She was distressed when she knew about her forced marriage proposal. One day, Akelo's uncle arranged to take Akelo to a man they have agreed to pay dowry. Akelo and then left home without her uncle's notice to seek for safety because she doesn't want to be married at earlier age. On the way, Akelo met a man who took her to the nearest police station. Now, Akelo got saved under the care of humanitarian organization to continue with her education. So if you can see, this is the community and the situation all girls live in South Sudan. And at that age of 11, Akelo did not attend any school at all. So she's now saved. She's starting her education at the age of 11 years old. So this is what contributes to, one of the reasons that contributes to girls under education in South Sudan. So what am I looking at in this advocacy presentation? The overall goal of the advocacy is to ensure that by 2030, the government of South Sudan prioritizes and demonstrates commitment to improving girls' education and protection in development and humanitarian contexts. In pursuit of this, the advocacy focuses on girls' education protection and the rights to be achieved through the following two specific objectives. So the objective one here is in this advocacy to achieve is by 2030, the government of South Sudan adopts and domesticates policies and laws that promotes, protect, and fulfill girl-child education. So the objective two is by 2030 again, girls improved access to quality and inclusive education and protection services. The activities to achieve the objectives and goals that I said before are as follows. So we will be supporting community level organizations, influencers to advocate for the promotion of girl child education and protection of their rights. Again, we'll be looking at lobbying meetings with influential members of the Parliamentary Committee on the Legal Affairs, Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, and Human Rights Commission. So this is very important so that to take a legal action against those violating girl-child rights in South Sudan. And again, strengthening capacity of children, specifically girls and boys, and youths to advocate for their rights. So for them to own the advocacy makes it more stronger. And we will be conducting policy analysis to determine the gaps that hinder promotion and protection of girl child education. So that's very important. Advocacy needs an analysis and research, more research to get findings so that a solution is found. And then we will be mobilizing the public on the positive impacts of girls' education so that they can be able to own it and they keep on promoting it for sustainability purpose. So at the same time, sensitizing the community on the grave violations and dangers of forced and earlier marriages that affects girls' education in South Sudan. As you can notice, one of the major reasons as to why girls are not going to school is that girls are looked at as resources and they are looked at as brides, and then they are kept at home and then in exchange of dowry so that poor families can benefit on. So in this case, what are the messages that we will be carrying and involving everybody in this campaign? One of the important message that we will be doing is that he who opens a school door for girls closes earlier pregnancies and marriage. And then education is power, give girls and boys equal opportunities. So girls and boys say no to earlier marriage and remain in school. Support our education today for better tomorrow. All, stakeholders, boys, girls, and everybody involved in this campaign will be using all these messages so that they can be able to mobilize girls to go back to school. So who are we targeting in this campaign? Uh, for a policy advocate or for an advocate to be successful, there should be an involvement of a lot of people, specifically the considering the environment and the key stakeholders, the influencers. So here I am looking at channeling a law, a policies through the parliament. So definitely the transition national legislators, that's going to be a target. We will be targeting and discussing them on ways of promoting girls' education so that a motion can be tabled in the parliament. And then we're looking at the Minister of General Education and Instruction in terms of budgeting and putting more budget for girls' education. And then Minister of Gender, Child and Social Welfare, also for the promotion of girls' education, which is very important. And then the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, this is in terms of legal consideration in case those who violate girl child education rights, and then they can be punished and brought to books. So the UN agencies for mobilization, and then civil society organization, the media houses, and members of parliament, transitional leaders, and community leaders. These are very important, specifically the faith-based leaders. They are the influencers and most of the community here to them, and then we need to involve them in this advocacy campaign. So the general public target, and then parents and children have to be to involve. So here we are talking of the inclusivity of this policy so that we can be able to achieve our aims and objectives. So I have briefly talked about the target and the audiences, and then we looked at the outputs. So the government of South Sudan, at the end of this campaign, will be able to develop and implement the Safe Schools Declaration practices for girls, and then enhanced public awareness on grave violation on girls' rights to education. This can be strengthened countrywide in order to promote girls' education. So increased access to decision makers and development of relationships that contribute to protection of girls' education in South Sudan. There will also be a reduction in child marriage rates, and then increase the enrollment and retention of girls in primary and secondary school. So if you can look in the first, when I was giving statistics about the facts of education in South Sudan, so the enrollment is really very low. So at the end of this campaign, there should be an increased enrollment and retention of girls in school. So what does the success look like in this campaign? So at the end of this campaign, the success here, we're looking at a future educated generation, specific for girls, and then decrease in infant mortality, and then decrease in maternal mortality, and then decrease in also in child marriage, increased involvement in political process. That's when girls are educated, they can get attracted to politics and be able to make decisions for their own self, specifically in the same on girl child marriage and then forced marriage. They also decrease in domestic and sexual violence, which mostly affected girls who are not educated, but now when they're educated, this definitely will decrease. So we'll have improved the socio-economic growth. So girls, when they're educated, they can be able to add into the economy of the country. So I have to look at the SWOT analysis of this advocacy. And South Sudan has a very rare context. In this context, there are a lot of things combined. We have a climate change, specifically flooding and drought in part of the country, and then coming to conflict and then violence across the country, in parts of the country also is persistent. So here the technical messaging and advocacy to attack the gender discrimination practices, and then parents teachers association willing to participate, collaboration with relevant stakeholders, government and stakeholders participation, and then community ownership of the advocacy will be our strength to achieve this advocacy for girls' access to education in South Sudan. And then the weakness we're looking at here is that the low national education budget. Always South Sudan has the lowest education budget being passed. That's a weakness. And then lack of professionally trained teachers, and then fragile judiciary and customary system up to now, and then our curriculum is really too stretched for now. So the threat is that conflict across the country, and some of the places are really very remote, and access to reach all children and community across the country will be very difficult. And then media activities always curtailed by intrusive cultural, traditional, and state national security actions. We have an experience that many people have been detained for going live to the media and talking about issues concerning the general population in the country. And then the cultural and traditional rejection. Some traditional cultures are deep rooted into what they do. They may be able to reject. And then there's poverty and economic meltdown that's currently in the country. So the opportunity I have realized here is that the South Sudan revitalized the peace agreement since there is conflict in the country. So once we have peace, that will be a hope and opportunity that I can be able to use to channel this advocacy for girls' access to education in South Sudan. And then in-country potential donors like the UN agency and international organizations. So there are a lot of organizations currently in South Sudan. So lobbying them and using them to fund a budget gap for this campaign will be very paramount. And then the public outcry for girls' education. Everybody right now knows that girls are not educated, and any initiative that mobilizes girls to go back to school will be a very big opportunity. So finally, the funding for this is that we will be looking at key ministry. I believe in the government, the key decision makers, because they are the traditional sources. We will be able to mobilize the government, and then in this government, we will look at the Ministry of General Education and Instruction, the Ministry of Gender, Child and Social Welfare, and then the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs in terms of law, and pushing in policies and pushing in laws that can be able to protect girls in school and protect girls' rights. So, of course, the UN agencies, the non-profit organizations, and also profit organizations that we can be able to lobby fund from them, and then the civil society organization lobbying them uh, from different corners so that they can be able to channel money to support this campaign. So with this, that marks the end of this advocacy presentation, and thank you so much. Any question is welcome.